invite our Spanish-speaking community members to click the button at the bottom of your Zoom screen and choose the Spanish option to hear the forum in that language.
Bueno, antes de comenzar, quisiera invitar a los participantes a este foro en español a que vayan al pie de la pantalla y presionen el globo y elijan la opción de español para escuchar esto en español. Gracias. Ok. Quiero invitarles a las personas que hablan español a que presionen el globo al pie de su pantalla para así poder escuchar este foro completamente en español. Muchas gracias.
Okay. Welcome to the State House District 12 Republican Primary Candidate Forum, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Boulder County. My name is Martine Eleanor. I am a proud member of the League, and I am pleased to serve as moderator for tonight's forum. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization. For over 100 years, we have encouraged informed and active participation in government and influenced public policy through education and advocacy. To remain nonpartisan, the League never supports or opposes political candidates or parties. Tonight, we are pleased to have two Spanish language interpreters. We have Catherine and we have Armando. The Colorado House of Representatives is the lower house of the Colorado General Assembly. The House is composed of 65 members from an equal number of constituent districts, with each district having a population of about 88,800 people. Representatives are elected to 2-year terms and are limited to 4 consecutive terms in office, but can run again after a 4-year respite. The legislative session begins no later than the second Wednesday in January and lasts up to 120 calendar days. House District 12 includes Lafayette, Louisville, Superior, Niwot, and Eastern Gun Barrel. The western border is Cherryvale, and then the boundary jogs east of 63rd Street. Now to the forum. The format for tonight's forum will be as follows. Each candidate will have a 1-minute opening statement, and then we will ask the questions, or we will ask the candidates as many questions as time permits. Questions have been submitted electronically to the League by the community and reviewed by our League of Women Voters volunteer screeners. For most of the questions, each candidate will have up to 1 minute. However, I may expand the time to answer depending on the question. We will finish with 1-minute closing statements. Tonight's forum participants are, in the order they appear on the Republican primary ballot, Robert Mailer and Mark Milliman. Now to the opening statements and questions. Please watch the timer and end when your time is up. I'll display the timer just for a moment so we can see it. It'll look like that. If the timer ends while you're speaking, I will allow you to finish your sentence, and then please promptly end so we can move on to the next question. Okay, now for the opening statements. We will begin with candidate Mailer.
Thank you very much for your time tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. My name is Bob Mailer. Just a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in Boulder County, actually in southern Boulder. My wife and myself currently reside in Lafayette. We've been here for over 20 years. We've seen this area grow and change significantly. I'm currently employed as an IT consultant for a multinational company, and this is the first time I've ever run for any public office. In running for this office, my focus is going to be a couple of things. Number one, encouraging and supporting families, doing whatever possible to address the escalating cost of housing. Also, addressing the infrastructure needed to support growing communities, water, roads, resiliency, and encouraging and supporting a culture of life from conception, natural death. Also, seeking to build a compromise between the parties and common ground. Why I'm running is a couple of things. Republicans seem to have given up regaining a voice in Colorado government, and I'm sick of the divisiveness in politics and hope to be able to make a difference.
Candidate Milliman. You're on mute. Please unmute.
Thank you. Sorry about that. My name is Mark Milliman, and I'd like to thank you for allowing me to be here this evening. I'm your unpolitician for House District 12. And I call myself the unpolitician because I believe I have no desire for a higher public office. And I'm running for state assembly because I want to make Colorado a better place to live and raise children. I believe it's time for all of us to do our part and serve our community so we can restore Colorado to the majesty and economic powerhouse it once was. I've lived and raised my family in Boulder County for the past 20 years, and I've started a few small businesses here and worked to promote high technology in our state, especially in the area of telecommunications. I have a master's of science degree in electrical engineering that has made me a lifelong learner so I can tackle and provide solutions to challenging problems that we have. And those challenging problems are around education of our children and raising our children, crime rates, and government that is run amok with excessive spending that is creating massive inflation. Thank you.
For the first question, we'll begin with candidate Milliman. Regarding your approach to the legislative process, what are your thoughts on encouraging bipartisanship? And how will you work with members of the other party to accomplish your goals?
Yeah, I'm running for that reason alone, based on thought diversity. We need more thought diversity in our legislature. People with different ideas and how to approach problems and look at them with an open mind instead of an ideological solution. I would hope that my colleagues on the other side that can get elected this time around would have the similar vision that I have in how we approach problems. And so I'm more than willing to work with somebody if their mind is open and for us to consider all alternatives and solutions to a problem instead of pushing our own political ideologies to create policy. These thought diversity and different ideas create the best public policy out there. And so that's how I plan on working with my colleagues in the legislature.
Candidate Mailer.
Yeah, so I pride myself on the ability to listen and the willingness to listen, not to respond, but listen to understand. So the way I would approach this is first to understand where is our commonality, because no matter how far we're apart on anything, we always have a common ground. So to understand where the common ground is, then explore where our differences are and how we can come together and how we can address those differences in a constructive manner where we are listening and respecting each other's opinion. Thank you.
For the next question, we'll start with candidate Mailer. Do you support state control over local government zoning decisions? If so, under what circumstances should the state override the local government planning process?
I do not support state control over local zoning. The best decisions are made for localities by the people who live in those areas. So they should be in charge of making the decisions that will affect them directly. Thank you.
Candidate Milliman.
I concur with Bob on that as well. The best decisions are made for zoning and how to grow communities are done at the local level. The latest state legislation that is passed that is pushing things from the state level and making zoning decisions is wrong, and it needs to be left up to the communities and how they see best to develop their communities based on their goals and local objectives. Thank you.
What legislative actions are needed to better support children and families in Colorado and to provide all Coloradans with access to basic needs, including food, housing, and healthcare? For candidate Milliman.
So one is I'm a strong advocate of parents being the primary caregiver, making decisions what's best suited for their family and their children. And that includes taking their educational dollars that go to taxes and deciding which institutions are the best for them. I believe that that will also create superior educational institutions. We're not doing a good job preparing our children for future society and careers, and we're actually, frankly, destroying our innovation by neglecting that. So, I feel that the parents should be making those decisions on that. And the same goes with healthcare decisions. The parents should have primary responsibility to make decisions that are best for their children and their child's health and well-being, and not the government. Thank you.
Candidate Mailer.
Yeah, I agree with most of what candidate Milliman said, that parents are the best to make the decisions. Parents must be financially supported so that they can make those decisions, whether this is in terms of taxes, in terms of giving them the money to educate their children so that they can educate them in the way appropriate for them. But to reiterate what candidate Milliman said, parents need to be in charge. Thank you.
What is your position on ballot proposal number 89, titled Right to Abortion? Candidate Mailer.
As I mentioned before, I am strongly supportive of a culture of life from conception to natural death. Thank you.
Candidate Milliman.
Yes, I agree with candidate Mueller here on this topic, but I also believe this has become an extremely divisive issue within the state, and our laws have gone way too far. What the majority, like 75% of people that live in the state, believe that there should be practical limits to abortion. And I believe that we should have practical limits to that the majority of the people support. And it should be a doctor-patient decision and not a governmental decision. But personally, I do support life and promoting life in all forms of it. But at the same time, I believe that we have a lot better things and more important things that we have to discuss in our society. And like most major industrialized countries, I think we should have practical limits on abortion. And that's a good starting point.
What role should the state play in providing funding for affordable housing? What sources should be tapped to fund affordable housing? Candidate Milliman.
So, I mean, your question is at the crux of the issue here about using taxes and fees to redistribute income to make housing affordable, when it is the government in the first place that has made housing unaffordable with excessive taxes, fees, and other regulations. For instance, after the Marshall Fire, the fees and additional building codes that have been put in place increased the cost of building a new home by $50,000 in Boulder County alone, further increasing unaffordability. Other decisions like zoning decisions and have also made housing unaffordable. I think we need to start there and look at why housing is unaffordable instead of taking money from one place to redistribute to the other to call housing affordable. That is not going to solve the problem. That is only going to mask it. Thank you.
Candidate Mailer.
Again, I would essentially agree with candidate Milliman that we should not be using state funds. We should not be using taxpayer funds to make housing affordable. Anytime the government gets involved in something, it generally goes not the way we expect it. I'm not an expert in this area, but I have to believe that government involvement in the financial industry and in housing is one of the reasons we're in the problem we are right now with totally unaffordable housing in Colorado. Thank you.
Should the influx of migrants into Colorado, especially to the Denver area, be aided at the state level rather than depleting the funds of the cities bearing the brunt of their costs? If you say yes, how is this best handled and funded? If no, please explain the position. Candidate Mailer.
Thank you. So I actually believe that this problem was caused by the federal government, and I believe that the federal government needs to solve this problem as well. What they've done, in my opinion, is they've created the problem and then dumped it on the states and the local cities and said, okay, y'all go figure out how to deal with it and pay for it. So I know this probably doesn't answer your question, but I believe that this should be paid for by the federal government, not states and localities. Thank you.
Candidate Milliman.
Once again, candidate Mailer and I concur in this. This is a federal problem. The federal government caused the issue by allowing the influx of these people and doing an end run around the system where millions of hardworking people chose to come into this country legally, but they're making it a local issue such that we're having to cut back basic services such as police and fire protection, substance abuse, mental health, and veterans support to our existing citizens. And the local governments have an inordinate amount of burden being placed on them to deal with this issue. Like candidate Mailer, I agree it is a federal issue, needs to be handled by our federal officials and solved at that level. Thank you.
Do you think that the legislature has any role in legislating the process or parameters for removing books from schools and public libraries? Candidate Milliman.
No, I do not. This is something I've been personally involved in and working with our local school districts and other individuals in the community to deciding, what is appropriate for young children. I do not believe it is a state issue for them to be decided, but to be decided on a local issue by parents because it does involve their children. I do not believe in book banning, and that's not what we're talking about. I am for free and open expression of ideas, but there are material and subject matters that are very inappropriate for children to be exposed to, especially at the elementary and middle school level. And again, that should be a community decision. And I'm working with our local school districts on deciding, what material is fit. And sexualizing our children is extremely inappropriate. Thank you.
Candidate Mailer.
Again, I agree with candidate Milliman that I am firmly opposed to book banning, but I also believe this should be the parents' decision and the local school board's decision, not whether or not the books are in the library, but whether they are accessible by children or young folks. It really should be up to the parents to make that decision. So the state should not have any role in this. Thank you.
What do you consider a fair tax system for Colorado? What changes would you make in the current system, including revenue sources? Candidate Mailer.
That's an interesting question. So fair is probably all relative. I think a fair tax system in Colorado, I personally believe that the income tax system right now in Colorado is, at least from my perspective, fairly fair. For the sources of revenue, again, we have the income taxes, we're pretty much everything is taxed already. What I have challenges with is new taxes, new revenue sources that are supposedly targeted to things such as schools, things like that, that they never seem to go to. I remember when the lottery came in, they said, "Oh, this is going to fund schools. Everything will be wonderful here," but it's not. Thank you.
Candidate Milliman.
Yes. The tax system we have right now is double dipping. They double dip when you get paid, and they dip when you get paid. They dip when you buy something, and that's unfair. Also, the recent increase that we have experienced with property tax increases have not been addressed as promised by the current legislature and the current governor, such that we are going to ballot initiative to try to truly solve the problem. Our state budget has increased without bounds through COVID and after COVID. I think it's time to rein that back in. Tabor, fortunately, places some limits on that, and we have some other caps in place, and we need to rein back government. I think our sources are fine. It's just that our government is spending way too much for way too many things that, as candidate Mailer said, do not get applied appropriately. Thank you.
Do you agree or disagree with any of the governor's recent vetoes of bills of the legislature passed this session? If so, which ones? Candidate Milliman.
Yeah, so he is not, I think, used his veto power enough to be the quote libertarian candidate that he says that he is. There's a lot of bills that have been passed that have placed additional restrictions that don't make sense, and there are some that he just didn't sign that he allowed to be passed that he said he was against. And so he has not held true to his word. I think that the legislature was very progressive in a lot of things that they passed that do not agree with Coloradans, and he did not use his libertarian values that he says he has to rein back and keep government reined back. Thank you.
Candidate Mailer.
Again, I agree with candidate Milliman on this one, that I would have been much happier to see the governor really follow his stated libertarian beliefs and actually stop some of the over-the-top bills that have gone through. Thank you.
What action is needed to promote a vibrant economy in our state? Candidate Mailer.
Thank you. So a couple of things. Number one is that I believe, again, education is important. We need to continue to focus on real education of our children, real education of people that are coming into the workforce or need to be relearn new skills. In addition, I think we need to look possibly at our taxes and say, how can we support new businesses, local businesses, not out-of-state businesses, but local businesses that are coming into or starting up in the region. Thank you.
Candidate Milliman.
As somebody that has started multiple businesses here and is currently in the process of doing 2 more, the state has made it very challenging to do business here through its regulations and the difficulty we have building new facilities and the regulations around certain industries, licensing. Everywhere we turn, there's a new fee, new tax, that we have to pay in order to even conduct business here. And it makes it very difficult and affordable. And that includes some of the wage requirements that have been made. And instead of letting the free market do what it can, it prevents us from employing people. The other thing is, Candidate Mailer said, is education. We need to do a better job with our educational time to focus on educating our children for the jobs and careers of the future, including those vocational jobs.
Many are concerned with the rising costs of rent in Colorado. Do you think that city councils should make policy decisions in regards to rent? Should the state make decisions in regards to rent? Candidate Milliman.
Again, we should learn from experience where it has been tried in multiple cities where you're referring to rent control. That has not worked and continues to make housing and rent unaffordable. Again, you have to look at the root cause to what's making rent unaffordable. And those are very similar to the affordable housing because people buy these properties and then they need to pay mortgages, pay taxes, and comply with the regulations. As that gets driven higher and higher, therefore rents are driven higher and higher. The other thing is supply. We need to continue to increase the supply of new housing. And that means, having localities be able to have zoning policies to promote, greater density housing and more affordable rental housing.
Candidate Mailer.
I agree that the state needs to stay out of this. It needs to be a local decision, but the decision also needs to take into account the people that have to live in the area. Candidate Milliman mentioned high density, but each of these areas need to take into account what is the culture of the area instead of just building. Right now, it seems everything is building. I do not agree with rent control. I am on the fence on the requirement. Some cities, for example, Lafayette, I believe, has a requirement for a certain number of low rent apartments going in wherever they're built. I'm on the fence on that one. I'm not sure whether that's the right answer or not.
Would you support the idea of looking into a different method of electing the Colorado legislature, which could provide more representation to various voting groups? It could involve larger districts with several representatives from each district and a different voting method, such as approval voting or a ranking method to determine the winners. Candidate Mailer.
No, I would not. I would not support that. I would not support bigger districts. I think if anything, we need smaller districts so that the representatives are actually represent the people, actually are able to listen to the people and get what they're thinking and be able to I don't know how you would represent a large, diverse group of people if you can't actually talk to them. The short answer to your question is no, I would not support that.
Candidate Milliman.
The only changes I would support would be to make the district smaller to increase representation of the people and greater thought diversity in the legislature. I have worked election integrity. I have seen how ranked choice voting has not worked in the city of Boulder and other jurisdictions. And it stifles the voice of minority parties and minority voices, whether it's thought or other types of minority. So by changing into ranked choice voting, it allows for coalitions and greater manipulations to promote candidates that can afford to spend the money to advertise themselves, and squashes the fringe voices that make our system great. So I would say let's keep it the way it is, and if anything, make districts smaller, have greater representation for everybody.
Should the legislature address the rising costs of home insurance? What could be done and how would it be funded? Candidate Milliman.
Again, you're looking for a government solution to a problem caused by government and the unintended consequences of legislation. I have seen, and California is going to go through this experiment again, but I have seen risk pooled systems in other states for auto insurance and homeowners insurance that have left huge deficits in state budgets. It doesn't work. We need to find other solutions to make homeowners and even auto insurance affordable. And again, that starts with the regulations imposed, as well as some of the stuff that's happened with the Insurance Commission and allowing insurers a lot of leeway to basically control the rates, of which the current incumbent in office has had a very heavy hand in.
What is your position on the state? Oh, sorry, Candidate Mailer.
Thank you.
I was wondering.
So that's okay. So I believe like Candidate Milliman said, we need to identify what the root cause is. And from what I've seen, I think the root cause of some of this is government overregulation right now. Why is it so expensive to build a house, build a new house, remodel a house? Is it driven by the cost of labor? What's driving it? How about regulation, overregulation? Lafayette just passed an ordinance not too long ago saying if you want to replace the roof on your house, you have to put in hail resistant shingles, which significantly increase the cost of replacing your roof, most of which is covered by an insurance company. Therefore, the cost is going to go up. Thank you.
Candidate Mailer, what is your position on the state controlling the approval of accessory dwelling units, also known as ADUs?
I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I think the state needs to stay out of this. This needs to be local decisions. The locality has the best understanding of their local people, the local needs, the areas that they're in. This needs to be a local decision. The state needs to stay out of it. Thank you.
Candidate Milliman.
To expand on what Candidate Mailer said, this is also a property rights issue that the property owner should also have a determination of how they want to best use their property. And whether it is to establish an ADU for various purposes, they should probably be able to do that. I'm all about, property rights and individual rights. And in order to enact that, the best way is to manage it at the local level and not the state level. Thank you.
Do you support the new school finance formula passed this session or this last session? Why? Oh, there we go. I'll start again. Do you support the new school finance formula passed this session? Why or why not? And are there any other changes to school funding that you support? Candidate Milliman.
I cannot recall the details of what was changed in that legislation. I know when it passed, I read it, and there were certain changes I did have in mind. So I have to go back and really review that. But I believe that more money needs to go to instructional education and to educating our children, and less for administrative purposes and what gets called administrative. They kind of cook the books on that. And some of this new legislation, enables further shifting of these funds for those types of purposes. I'm for giving the teachers the most money possible to do their jobs and to hire the best and most qualified talent to educate our children, and to do that with the least amount of overhead possible.
Candidate Mailer.
I am not familiar enough with what was passed to actually answer this question. However, anytime something gets passed and it's stated that this is awesome, this is going to fix all the problems, everything's going to be wonderful, I get worried. So that's a concern on my side. Thank you.
What measures would you support for Colorado to deal with the climate crisis or work towards climate resilience? Candidate Mailer.
Yeah, so a couple of things. As candidate Milliman mentioned, the Louisville fire, which was very near and dear to my heart since I live not too far from there. What I would support is a couple of things. Number one is fire mitigation. How can we build communities that are more resilient to fires? I would also support people making their own decisions. For example, if they wanted to buy an EV, go ahead and buy an EV. I would not support government mandates on those kinds of things. I would support government education on what are the options, what can we do instead of government mandates. Thank you.
Candidate Milliman.
Yeah, so we need to get an accurate basis of where we stand in the world, and where Boulder County and the state of Colorado stands in the world, and how it can impact climate, or if it even is impacting climate. There's different schools of thought out there, and since we have about a dozen labs here in Boulder County alone dedicated to climate, we should be able to get some more unobjective views of this. But as candidate Mailer said, I think that it's up to the individual to choose what's right for them and what their energy needs are, instead of having it dictated to them by the government and government mandates. Again, there's always the unintended consequences of them, such as the higher cost of housing and the higher cost of living here, and the impact of inflation that these regulations have. And do these restrictions really have an impact on anything in the world? Thank you.
Okay, now it is time for closing statements. We'll begin with Candidate Milliman.
Well, I'd like to thank you for hosting this forum. It's been very informative and hopefully educational to those that are both online and that watch it later. Hopefully more watch it later than are online now. I think it was good for both candidate Mailer and I to discuss our policies on these issues and get them out in the open. Again, I think both of us take an individual view of an approach to our policies. But, the bottom line is it's time to restore diversity in our government, thought diversity. The best policy is derived through diversity of views and ideologies. I offer a thoughtful, analytical approach to public policy based on my decades of experience in business, both big and small. If you elect me, I will serve you and the community to make policy that benefits you, your family, and Colorado over special interests and ideology. Thank you again for your time.
Candidate Mailer.
Yes, I'd also like to thank you very much for this time. The questions were very, very thoughtful and made me actually think more than once. I also would like to say, if you see fit to elect me, where I will really focus, one of my main focuses is on getting the rancor out of our politics. It seems like we spend so much time calling each other names and saying how terrible we are that we're not actually able to listen to each other and come to understand where our commonality is and grow on that. We've got so many problems facing this state right now that fighting with each other all the time just takes our focus off what needs to be done. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And on behalf of the League, I would like to thank our candidates for not only their participation in tonight's forum, but also for their participation in the democratic process. Running for office and serving as an elected official is hard work, and we really appreciate your efforts. And finally, thank you to the Boulder County viewers that are participating. It's up to all of us to make sure we respect and work to protect our democratic processes. Too many people have struggled to win these rights and for us not to use them. It starts with being an informed and active voter. Before signing off, I would like to alert voters that tonight's forum, as well as many others, will be available at the League's website, that's lwvbc.org, as well as the YouTube channel for the League of Women Voters of Boulder County, and vote411.org. Vote 411 is the League's premier voter information guide that supplies nonpartisan information on state and local candidates, ballot issues and questions, and much more. Resources are available on Vote 411 in both English and Spanish. The League of Women Voters of Boulder County works throughout the year to help empower voters and defend democracy. If you would like to lend your time and skills to encourage civic engagement for all people in a nonpartisan manner, please join us. All the information you need is on our website at lwvbc.org. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.